Our next speaker is an associate professor of sports psychology and a performance enhancement consultant. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Les Podlog.
This morning, I was startled into consciousness at the unruly hour of 5:45, which is typically when my 3-year-old and 6-year-old wake me up, and I sauntered down the stairs half asleep to do what I do every morning, which is to pour them a soothing, calming glass of milk. It's a relatively simple motor skill that requires essentially little to no conscious processing or thought of any kind whatsoever, right? It's an easy skill, no problem at all. Now, let's change the scenario for a moment. I'm standing in front of an audience, a group of professional speakers who I've never met before in my life, and this woman here is thinking, you know, the Canadian accent sounds a little bit funny. I'm surprised you haven't been saying a lot more often. And this gentleman at the back is thinking, you know, I'm a little underwhelmed by the appearance. Perhaps a coat or a tie would have been in order. And as I'm having these doubtful thoughts, I'm starting to get tension in my stomach. My heart rate is increasing. My mouth is dry, and my hands are starting to shake. And as I perform that very same simple motor skill, I seem to be having a lot more difficulty. Many of us would subscribe to the belief that challenging events, adversity, or difficulty somehow leave the individual compromised, weaker, or debilitated. In fact, conventional wisdom would have us believe that the way or the path to a good life, a happy life, is one in which we experience pleasurable, enjoyable, satisfying experiences. And yet, my research that I've conducted over the past 15 years on individuals who've suffered traumatic and adverse events, and my own experiences in the sport of amateur wrestling have revealed something very different. Today, I want to suggest that not only are difficulties, of course, an inevitable part of life, but rather than being something that we should avoid, I want to suggest that we should embrace them and even seek them out. I mentioned the sport of wrestling, which for many of you may conjure images of flamboyant, hypermasculine, scantily clad individuals. While the scantily clad part is certainly true, it's also true that wrestling has been likened to a physical chess match in which the individual is pushed to their ultimate physical and mental limits. Years ago, I had the good fortune of training and competing with a fellow named Daniel Igali, who's pictured here in red. Daniel came from Nigeria, and he became Canada's first world champion in 1999, and he subsequently won the Olympic Games in the year 2000. After Daniel emerged victorious from his Olympic Games, we were sitting in the change room at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada. And I asked him, I said, Daniel, what was going through your mind as you stepped out onto the mat for the Olympic finals? Daniel knew that Canada had never had an Olympic champion in the sport of wrestling. He also understood that he was going to be able to bring prestige and attention to the sport of wrestling. And I can tell you, in Canada, no one cares about anything other than ice hockey. He also was aware that he stood to gain personal and financial resources. Now, I should also mention one other thing. A month before the Olympics, Daniel tore a ligament in his knee, and he was required to have a surgical procedure that hindered and debilitated his preparations prior to the Olympic Games. Again, I asked him, what was going through your mind? He said, with each passing match, right, as he faced the Georgian, the Cuban, the American, and the Iranian, he was developing a greater sense of confidence and competence in his injury. That as he went to the final, he was focused on implementing and executing skills and techniques that were within his control. He suggested that he wasn't thinking about anything past the match, but he was simply excited to embrace the challenge that lay in front of him. There are a number of features in Daniel's story that are consistent with individuals who have suffered traumatic or adverse life events, be they prisoners of war, individuals who have suffered loss of a limb or their sight, or individuals who have encountered extreme abuse or even deprivation. Some of these individuals appear to emerge on a trajectory where they grow stronger from the event. And if you ask those individuals, in hindsight, if you could go back in time, would you take away that event? In other words, would you not have had that experience? And consistently what these individuals indicate is that despite the challenge or difficulty, they would not. They would have that event in their life. And here's why. It is through adversity and difficulty that the research shows individuals are given opportunities to self-reflect and to try and make sense or make meaning of the challenge and the event. And it is through that self-reflection that one is likely to emerge more robust, more resilient, or psychologically capable. The other thing that happens through challenging or difficult events is that through the multitude of smaller events within that adversity, people are given the opportunity to develop their personal sense of competence, prowess, and skill as they overcome the multitude of challenges inherent in that difficulty. And when they do that, they tend to grow psychologically. There's two other features that adversity helps enable. And one is to cultivate a sense of autonomy. In other words, it is through the event that individuals are likely to assume control over that which they can control. And typically in the aftermath of an adverse event, people may come to the realization that life is more random or chaotic or out of their control than they had previously assumed. And it's through these events that people focus on the things that they can control. Lastly, when people experience trauma, adversity, or difficulty, it's through that we're more likely to connect or to reach out to other individuals. And when we do that, when we seek out support, it has the tendency to make us more resilient, to psychologically grow, and to make us more robust. So here's the thing. Please do not think that I am suggesting or advocating that you go and put yourself in harm's way or that you intentionally experience a traumatic event. But what I am suggesting is that difficulties are inevitable. Rather than trying to avoid them, I want to encourage you to embrace them and even to seek them out. So the next time you have difficulty at work or you're given an opportunity to give a presentation or to take on a new challenge, I want to encourage you to embrace and seek out that experience. Thank you.